On July 7, 2026, Lionel Messi and Argentina pulled off one of the greatest comebacks in World Cup history. Down 2 goals to Egypt with time running out, they scored 3 times and stormed into the quarterfinals in front of 70,000 screaming fans in Atlanta. And while the confetti was still falling, a story broke back home in Buenos Aires that changed everything. The FBI is investigating Argentine football, the federation behind the defending world champions, the organization that employs Lionel Messi's national team. According to reports, American federal agents are tracing more than $300 million that move through the United States banking system, trying to determine whether the most celebrated football federation on the planet has been running something far darker behind the scenes. And here's the part that makes this story almost impossible to believe. Argentina is playing this World Cup on American soil. The team is chasing back-to-back titles inside the exact same country whose federal agents are now digging through their finances. The president of the federation is in Miami with the squad, and the prosecutors examining his organization are working out of offices in Washington and Miami at the very same time. This is the story of how Argentina's golden era collided with an FBI investigation. And to understand how it got here, you need to understand the man at the center of it all. The company in Florida that nobody had ever heard of, and a trail of money that investigators say leads to some very strange places. Let's start with the night everything came to a head. Atlanta, July 7, 2026. Round of 16. Argentina against Egypt. On paper, this should have been routine. Argentina had won their group with a perfect 9 points, beating Algeria, Austria, and Jordan, while conceding just once. Egypt had needed a penalty shootout against Australia just to get here. But football doesn't care about paper. Egypt came out fearless, and by the second half they were leading 2-0. The defending champions were staring at what would have been one of the biggest eliminations in World Cup history. And it got worse before it got better. Messi stepped up to a penalty spot with a chance to claw one back, and he missed. Then came the moment that Egypt will never forget. Egypt appeared to have scored again, a goal that would have effectively ended the match. VAR intervened and the goal was disallowed for a foul in the build-up, a decision that commentators questioned in real time, with some arguing the intervention went beyond what the VAR protocol is designed to do. From there, the match tilted. Egypt's goalkeeper was booked. 3 more Egyptian outfield players were booked. A penalty appeal was waved away. Egypt's head coach was booked for arguing with the referee. And Argentina, as Argentina always seems to do, found a way. 3 goals in the closing stages, capped by Enzo Fernandez striking deep into added time. 3-2. Quarterfinals? Bedlam. Egypt was furious. Head coach Hossam Hassan declared afterwards that his team had been cheated out of a place in the quarterfinals. The president of the Egyptian Football Association, Hani Abo Rida, filed a formal complaint with FIFA against French referee François Letexier and his entire officiating team, demanding explanations for the decisions and asking that the officials be removed from future World Cup matches. Across social media, accusations flew that the tournament was being managed to keep Messi and Argentina alive. Now, refereeing complaints happen at every World Cup. Losing teams have blamed officials since the tournament began in 1930. Under normal circumstances, this controversy would have burned hot for 2 days and faded. But these are not normal circumstances. Because within 24 hours of that final whistle, the Argentine newspaper La Nación published a report that turned a refereeing controversy into an international scandal. According to the paper, the United States Department of Justice and the Federal Bureau of Investigation are conducting a preliminary investigation into the financial operations of the Argentine Football Association inside the United States. Suddenly, the conversation was no longer about one VAR call in Atlanta. It was about whether the federation running the world champions could survive the scrutiny of the most powerful law enforcement agency on Earth. So what exactly are the Americans looking at? According to reporting led by investigative journalist Nicholas Pizzi at La Nación, Federal investigators are trying to establish how the AFA channeled more than $300 million through the American financial system, and whether any of those transactions could constitute crimes under United States jurisdiction. The words being used in the reports are heavy ones: money laundering, bank fraud, concealment of potentially illicit funds. It is important to say clearly, right up front, that no criminal charges have been filed in the United States against the AFA, against its president, or against any of its officials in connection with this probe. The Department of Justice has not made any public announcement. This is, by every account, a preliminary investigation, the stage where prosecutors gather testimony and follow the money to decide whether a full criminal case exists. Everything you are about to hear comes from investigative reporting and court records, and everyone involved is presumed innocent. But even a preliminary FBI investigation into a National Football Federation is extraordinary. And the details that have emerged are stranger than anything a screenwriter would dare invent. At the center of the American probe sits a company almost nobody in football had ever heard of: Tour Prod Enter LLC, a limited liability company incorporated in Florida in August 2021. According to La Nacion, this Miami-based entity acted as the collection agent for the AFA's international commercial contracts. In plain terms, when global brands paid for the right to attach their names to the world champions, much of that money reportedly flowed not to Buenos Aires, but through this Florida company's American bank accounts. Reports indicate the transactions under review include sponsorship payments from companies such as Adidas and Warner Bros. Discovery. Documents reviewed by La Nacion reportedly show that Tour Prod Enter handled at least $260 million in AFA revenue through accounts at 5 major American financial institutions: Citibank, Synovus, Bank of America, JP Morgan Chase, PNC Bank. Now, using an American company to collect international revenue is not by itself a crime. Plenty of legitimate organizations structure their commercial operations this way. The question investigators are reportedly asking is not why the money came in. It is where the money went next, because according to the newspaper's reporting, while part of the funds could be tied to identifiable operating expenses, roughly $57 million was allegedly transferred to various companies and beneficiaries without any apparent economic justification. And this is where the story takes a turn that sounds like fiction. Tens of millions of dollars were reportedly wired to companies that appeared to provide no identifiable services, companies allegedly controlled by individuals who, according to official records cited by La Nacion, were receiving social welfare benefits and living in Bariloche or Buenos Aires. Sit with that for a moment. The allegation being examined is that money generated by the most famous national team in world football, money from the commercial machine built around Lionel Messi and the world champions, allegedly ended up flowing toward recipients with no visible business activity at all. People on welfare listed as controlling companies receiving international wire transfers. If investigators can establish that those transfers were designed to disguise the origin or purpose of the funds, that is the textbook definition of the crimes American prosecutors specialize in. Argentine television reporting has also identified theater producer Javier Ferroni and his wife Erica Gillette as central figures because of their connection to Tour Prod Enter, with Argentine prosecutors reportedly summoning the couple to testify as investigators, examine the hundreds of millions of dollars that allegedly moved through the company's accounts. And the Americans are not treating this casually. According to the reporting, 3 federal prosecutors are leading the inquiry: Patrick Gushew and Christopher Ting in Washington, and Michael Berger of the Southern District of Florida. That last name should make anyone connected to this case very nervous. Berger previously helped secure a money laundering conviction in Miami against Carlos Ramon Polit, the former Comptroller General of Ecuador. This is a prosecutor with a track record of convicting powerful South American officials on exactly the kind of charges being examined here. The interviews have already begun. Argentine businessman Guillermo Toffoni, a well-known fixer of international friendlies for the national team, reportedly sat for a video conference with federal prosecutors and FBI agents in Washington and Miami that ran roughly 3 hours. When journalists asked him about it, he declined to confirm or deny that the meeting ever happened. According to reports, investigators are actively seeking witnesses with direct knowledge of the Federation's financial dealings during the current administration. And La Nación reported that investigators have also examined how AFA President Claudio Tapia structured the Federation's international commercial agreements, the arrangements at the very heart of the probe. Which brings us to the man himself. Because you cannot understand this scandal without understanding Claudio Tapia. They call him Chiqui. Born in September 1967, he came up through the gritty world of Buenos Aires club football, becoming president of Barracas Central, a modest club in the capital, back in 2001. He married into power. His wife Paula is the daughter of Hugo Moyano, the legendary truckers' union boss and one of the most influential figures in Argentina. For years, Tapia was seen as a mid-level operator, a man with connections but limited reach. Then Argentine football fell apart. After the death of longtime AFA boss Julio Grondona in 2014, the Federation descended into chaos. There was an infamous presidential election in 2015 where 75 voting officials somehow produced a 38-38 tie, a result so mathematically impossible it became a global punchline. FIFA eventually had to step in and normalize the Federation. And when the dust settled, in March 2017, Claudio Tapia was elected president of the AFA almost unopposed. Critics scoffed. They called him unqualified, a product of backroom deals and union muscle. And then something remarkable happened. Under Tapia's presidency, Argentina hired Lionel Scaloni, a coach with almost no senior experience, and built the greatest run in the national team's modern history. The 2021 Copa America, Argentina's first major trophy in 28 years. The 2022 Finalissima, the 2022 World Cup in Qatar, with Messi finally lifting the trophy that had eluded him. The 2024 Copa America. By 2025, Tapia had been elevated to the FIFA Council itself, representing South America at the very top of the global game. Domestically, he was untouchable. Winning does that. Every trophy Messi lifted became armor for the man running the Federation. But behind the armor, the questions kept piling up. There were long-running accusations of refereeing favoritism toward Barracas Central, the club Tapia once ran, and which is now presided over by his son Matthias. There was the storm in 2025 when the league awarded a championship title to Rosario Central in a manner that left much of Argentine football stunned. And most seriously of all, there was the money. In December 2025, the dam broke. Before dawn on December 9th, federal judge Luis Armella ordered 33 simultaneous raids across Argentine football. Agents hit the AFA's historic headquarters on Via Monte Street in Buenos Aires. They hit the national team's training complex in Ezeiza, the sacred ground where Messi and his teammates prepare for matches. They hit 17 clubs, including giants like Racing, San Lorenzo, and Independiente, and yes, Barracas Central. Picture that scene for a second. 4 in the morning, federal agents carrying boxes out of the same building where Argentina's World Cup triumphs were planned and celebrated. Officials at the Ezeiza complex watching investigators comb through offices just meters from the pitches where the champions train. In a country where football is closer to religion than sport, it was an earthquake. The raid stemmed from an investigation into a financial firm called Sur Finanzas, and its owner, a businessman named Ariel Vallejo, described in reports as a close associate of Tapia. Prosecutors accuse Vallejo of operating a money laundering structure that allegedly ran partly through sponsorship deals with football clubs. Argentina's tax authority separately accused the firm of evading roughly 3.3 billion pesos in taxes. And the reported details of the relationship between Sur Finanzas and the AFA raised eyebrows everywhere. The firm allegedly provided loans to clubs and collected repayments through television and marketing rights. It allegedly became the exclusive financial partner of the Federation. It sponsored AFA competitions, and it sponsored Barracas Central. And according to reporting on the case, it even issued Tapia a personal credit card that was allegedly used to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars. Vallejo is the main target of that domestic investigation, and Tapia has not been charged in it. But the raids kept coming. In February 2026, roughly 30 more raids were carried out in connection with the firm. In May, prosecutors requested that Vallejo also face questioning for fraudulent administration. And Tapia's personal legal situation at home grew darker still. On June 26, 2026, just days before the Egypt match, an Argentine appeals court upheld separate criminal charges against the AFA, against Tapia, and against Federation Treasurer Pablo Tovigino over the alleged improper withholding of roughly 19 billion pesos, around $13 million, in workers' pension contributions. Tapia denies wrongdoing in that case, which remains entirely under Argentine jurisdiction. But think about the picture this paints. The president of the World Champion Federation traveled to the World Cup with criminal charges pending at home, needing court permission to leave the country. Argentine courts granted it. And so Chiqui Tapia has spent this tournament in Miami and in the stands, watching his golden team, while investigators on 2 continents examine his federation. Now, the AFA has an explanation for all of this, and to be fair, it is not a crazy one. For the past 2 years, Argentine football has been at war with the government of President Javier Milei. Milei wants to open the door to privately owned football clubs, transforming the century-old model where Argentine clubs are member-owned civil associations. Tapia and the AFA have blocked that push at every turn. The fight has been vicious, public, and deeply personal. And the Federation argues that the entire wave of investigations is a coordinated attack designed to break its resistance and seize control of the most commercially valuable institution in the country. There is at least some documented substance to the backstory. In September 2024, Argentina's security ministry under Patricia Bullrich reportedly passed information to American officials about possible risk factors tied to the AFA. And after the American probe became public, Milei's government sent a letter to federal prosecutors pledging full cooperation. So when the AFA says the government is actively helping foreign investigators pursue its own national federation, that is not paranoia. That is on the record. The Federation's ambassador in North America, former Miami Mayor Tomás Regalado, addressed the allegations at a forum in Miami, insisting that investigative measures alone do not establish guilt. Whether the pressure represents genuine anti-corruption enforcement or a power grab is a question Argentine courts and possibly American ones will eventually have to answer. But here is the problem with the defense. The FBI has been down this road with South American football before. And the last time, it ended with dawn arrests, guilty pleas, and prison sentences. Cast your mind back to May 2015. Zurich, Switzerland. Plainclothes officers walked into the Bauer Olac Hotel at dawn and arrested some of the most powerful men in world football, acting on indictments from the United States Department of Justice. The FIFA corruption case, the scandal the world came to know as FIFA Gate, eventually charged dozens of football officials and marketing executives with racketeering, wire fraud, and money laundering conspiracies involving hundreds of millions of dollars in bribes tied to television and marketing rights. South American football was at the very center of it. Federation presidents from across the continent were convicted or pleaded guilty. And American prosecutors claimed jurisdiction for one simple, devastating reason. The money touched the United States. Wire transfers moved through American banks. Meetings happened on American soil. That was enough. What made FIFA Gate so devastating was not just who got arrested, it was how the case was built. American prosecutors spent years quietly flipping insiders, gathering banking records, and following wire transfers before anyone in football even knew they were being watched. By the time the arrests came, the evidence was overwhelming. Marketing executives cooperated. Federation presidents testified against each other. Careers that had taken decades to build collapsed in a matter of months. And the sport learned a lesson it has never forgotten. When the United States Department of Justice starts asking questions about football money, it usually already knows most of the answers. Argentina was never a bystander in that story. Julio Grondona, the man who ran the AFA for 35 years before Tapia's era and served as FIFA's senior vice president, died in 2014 before the indictments landed, but his name surfaced again and again in the American proceedings, with cooperating witnesses describing payments connected to him. The Federation Tapia inherited was an institution already scarred by the biggest corruption case in the history of sport. And that is why this new investigation is so serious. The FBI and the Department of Justice have already proven, in open court, that they can and will prosecute football officials from other countries when the money flows through American banks. The playbook exists. The precedent exists. The prosecutors exist. Michael Berger has already convicted a senior South American official in a Miami courtroom. If investigators conclude that AFA money moving through Citibank, Bank of America, JP Morgan Chase, and the rest was structured to conceal illicit funds, jurisdiction will not be a problem. The moment those wires crossed into the American banking system, they landed squarely inside the reach of United States law. The timing makes everything more combustible. The AFA is not just any federation right now. It is the federation of the defending world champions, competing in a World Cup hosted by the United States, with matches in the very cities where the prosecutors work. Tapia has been photographed at stadiums across America, while agents from the host country's federal police examine his organization's books. There has arguably never been a stranger split screen in the history of the sport. And the on-field controversies keep feeding the fire. After the Egypt match, critics around the world openly connected the dots, fairly or not, between a federation under financial investigation and refereeing decisions that kept its team alive. Al Jazeera reported that experts were questioning influence and the perceived need to keep Messi's side in the tournament. Egyptian players and officials called the outcome unjust. One Egyptian voice went as far as calling the tournament rigged. To be absolutely clear, there is no evidence connecting the FBI probe to anything that happened on the pitch in Atlanta. The investigation concerns bank transfers and commercial contracts, not referees. FIFA has not sanctioned Argentina, and the team's place in the tournament has never been in question. But perception is its own force. Once the words FBI and Argentina appeared in the same sentence, every marginal call started being viewed through a darker lens. So where does this go from here? In the short term, the football continues. Argentina faces Switzerland on Saturday, July 11th, at Arrowhead Stadium in Kansas City, with a semi-final against the winner of England and Norway waiting beyond it. The Swiss have never beaten Argentina in 7 attempts, stretching back to 1966, but they arrive having reached their first World Cup quarterfinal since 1954, built on a suffocating defense that did not concede in regulation time through 2 knockout rounds. Messi, at 39, is leading the Golden Boot race and chasing the perfect ending, a second consecutive World Cup, something no nation has achieved since Brazil in 1962. The players, by all accounts, are being shielded from the storm. There is no suggestion whatsoever that any player is involved in or even aware of the financial matters under review. Their job is football, and they have been doing it magnificently, even if they have needed 2 miracle comebacks to survive. In the longer term, everything depends on what the prosecutors find. A preliminary investigation can die quietly if the evidence does not hold up. It can also become an indictment. The Department of Justice will decide whether the testimony and the banking records justify a formal criminal case, and reports suggest investigators may summon former government officials who monitored AFA operations for further questioning. If charges ever come, the consequences would cascade far beyond Buenos Aires. Tapia sits on the FIFA Council. The AFA is a pillar of South American football. And FIFA itself, an organization that spent a decade rebuilding its image after 2015, would face agonizing questions about a sitting council member whose federation was charged by the same prosecutor's office that once brought FIFA to its knees. For now, FIFA has said nothing publicly about the probe, a silence that critics have already begun to question. There is also the domestic endgame. The war between Tapia and the Milei government will not stop at the final whistle of this World Cup. If Argentina lifts the trophy again, Tapia becomes almost impossible to remove, a man wrapped in 3 stars and untouchable glory. If the investigations escalate, even a trophy may not save him. Argentine football has seen this movie before. Grondona ruled for 35 years and died undefeated, only for the truth to spill out in an American courtroom after he was gone. The lesson of FIFA Gate was that in football, the reckoning often arrives long after the parades. And that is the strange, uncomfortable magic of this moment. On the field, Argentina is writing one of the great sporting stories of the century. An aging genius dragging his country toward immortality, one impossible comeback at a time. Off the field, according to investigators on 2 continents, the institution behind that story may be concealing something very different. Both things are happening at once, in the same country, in the same week, sometimes in the same city. Maybe the probe fizzles. Maybe every one of those 57 million unexplained dollars has an innocent explanation waiting to be heard. Or maybe years from now, we will look back at the summer of 2026 the way we look back at the spring of 2015, as the moment the FBI quietly started pulling a thread that unraveled everything. Because that is how these cases work. They move slowly, silently, and then all at once. Nobody outside a handful of offices knows what the investigators have found. Nobody knows which witnesses have talked, which records have been subpoenaed, or how close the Department of Justice is to a decision. The only people who know are not saying a word. For now, the world champions play on. Saturday night, Kansas City, Switzerland, 90 minutes from a semifinal, while men in suits in Washington and Miami keep reading bank statements. Whatever happens next, this story is far from over, and when the next chapter breaks, you will want to be here for it. Like and subscribe for more deep dives into the biggest stories in football. Until next time.